Okay. Good evening, everyone who is present. This is August 17th, 2020. It is a virtual meeting of the Culver Redevelopment Commission. We're meeting online according to the directives issued by the governor during the pandemic. A couple of ground rules. We would ask that you please mute your audio unless you're speaking or mean to be speaking, so we don't get a lot of background noise, particularly if you're on a phone. Secondly, this meeting is being recorded, and if you speak or choose to speak during the meeting, that is your consent to be recorded and to have that recording rebroadcast. I think without further ado, Paul, can you please take roll?
Certainly. Rich West.
Present.
Sally Ricciardi.
Here.
Paul DeBenedictis. Here. Karen Schumann. Karen Schumann. She is not present. Sue McIntyre. Sue is not here. And Tom Uhas.
Present.
All right. Roll the
Sue thanks, Paul. Sue had advised me that she would not be available for this evening's call. And Sally wasn't sure, and we're lucky that she has joined us. So we'll move into the agenda, and we'd ask for the approval of the July 20th minutes. They've been circulated. I didn't a motion for that approval.
So moved, Sally.
Okay, Sally moved. Is there a second, please?
I will second. This is Tom.
Okay, Tom, thank you. So we have a motion to approve the July 20th minutes made by Sally, seconded by Tom. Paul, could you please take the roll?
Certainly. Rich West.
Yes.
Sally.
Aye.
Paul says aye. And Tom.
Aye.
Motion is passed unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to the financial reports. The cash flow statement I distributed earlier today, it was updated based upon the claims that we're going to consider in a few minutes. It's basically just sort of an FYI tool for us to use as we consider future expenditures going forward. You will note that it does reflect the payment we received it was actually late June. It was on the July statement, but I didn't pick it out. But it does reflect the payments we received for the tax payments for the first 6 months of the year. And you'll note it is significantly less than what was in our projected budget. I don't think that that's unusual or unexpected because of the forgiveness on late fees that was authorized by the governor. So hopefully we will pick that up in the December or the fall payment. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything exceptional to report there. Any questions on the cash flow statement?
Rich, this is Paul. Maybe this to educate myself. Under projected balances toward the bottom, going across the cash flow statement, miscellaneous COVID, $12,000 we put in there. Was that the two developed Culver projects, or is that a combination of other things?
It was a two developed Culver projects, and I didn't have another bucket to put the flowers in. And I think I thought the flowers were somewhat related to that project because we assumed it or approved the project because of the financial situation with all of the small businesses. So that's where it is lumped, and there's $4,200 in there. Otherwise, it is just the two projects for developed Culver.
So my follow-on is the extra money that's in there, the $33.55.
Yes.
Does that roll out to something else? Does that roll back into our budget since both of those projects are complete?
It doesn't come out of the budgets. If you see the amount should transfer, I can't get the sheet open on my computer, but the amount will transfer up to the top of the page. So whatever was paid out will show an expense toward the top of the page under the itemized projects. But the balance is not deducted unless it's paid.
All right, and that balance it's not a commitment, in that both of those projects were completed, and the third project for Navigator never really took any money because it didn't go that direction. So what does that 3350, any of those remaining balances and something like that, is that a future commitment that we're making? Again, I'm just trying to understand this. Is that a commitment that we made, or once those projects are done, should the balance in there for, should that roll back into our TIFs? I'm just wondering, you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yes, I know. And what I'm trying to say in return is that it never got withdrawn from the TIFs.
Okay.
So it isn't reflected as a commitment, and that there's again, whatever the dollar amount is sitting out there that unaccounted for. It was something we initially committed, but it never was withdrawn from any of the above statements, which is what reflects the balance in the TIFs. Does that make sense?
Sure. Uncommitted money, and it goes away at the end of the calendar year, whatever balance shows there, but we never think of it as money that we've committed to something and it's extra sitting around.
Correct, unless it's a longer term project. For example, if you look at the trails, you will see the dollars that remain in the balance at the bottom of the page carried out in 2021 and 2022 and maybe 2023 above. But on those sort of one-off projects like that does not get, it doesn't get debited against anything unless it's actually spent.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on this confusing report? Okay, if not, then I would move on to the financial statement, which is Karen had distributed and hopefully is less confusing. Any questions for, I think Karen Heim is on the phone. Any questions for Karen on that report?
If not, Rich, just real quick, both of the receipts for that month, for this month under capital fund for TIF 1 and 2, is that just interest?
That's just interest reflected in August because the payment was actually on, I believe, the July statement. And in fact, I know it was on the July statement because I went back to double check it, and it was, so the amount reflected on the top of the cash flow statement as coming in as actually paid was on the July statement. So what you see in the August statement is just interest.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Or Karen, did you have any comments or anything you wanted to make on the report?
I have nothing.
Okay. All right. If there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve the July financial report.
I will make the motion to approve the July 31st report as presented.
This is Paul. I will second that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to approve the July Redevelopment Commission financial report made by Tom, seconded by Paul. Is there any discussion? If not, Paul, I'd ask you to poll the members.
Certainly. Tom?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Sally?
Aye.
Rich? Rich?
Aye.
Oh, the motion is passed unanimously.
Aye.
We heard you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Wasn't sure. Okay, we'll move on to the claims next. I think, again, Karen had circulated the claims for the month of August. Any questions on the claims? The first two claims for Thomas Engineering, as I understand it, Jonathan and Karen, those are for the Main Street, the South Main Street project, the paving and sewer and stormwater extension down there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And since I didn't have it specifically on my report, just a quick update since you brought that one up. Bob and I were on a couple emails with the engineer, and NIPSCO has to relocate a gas line before we can get started there on Davis Street, and we're trying to get a confirmed scheduled date for that, but it should only take them a couple days, and it should be probably next week, was the last we heard, and they think they'll be done with their end of it before August, and then we'll actually see construction start right after Labor Day with the actual storm line. The reason why we're a little concerned is just about paving season. They already kind of raised a red flag that they're worried about trying to get E&B in before the end of October to make sure it gets paved this year. We're still pushing for that, but just FYI.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Any questions about the claims? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the claims as presented.
This is Sally. I'll make a motion to approve the claims.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Do we have a second?
This is Paul. I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So we have a motion to approve the claims made by Sally, seconded by Paul. If there's no further discussion, Paul, would you poll the members, please?
Certainly. Rich?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
Paul? Aye. Tom?
Aye.
The motion is passed.
Thank you. Moving on to the town manager's report, Jonathan.
Yeah, on Stellar projects, the two Okra projects are substantially complete and really 99% wrapped up. I think Shannon, our grant administrator, is in the process of closing those out. We still have a retainage bill left at the Beach Lodge, but like I said, really just kind of wrapping things up on those two. On the INDOT projects, I do have one item for you, and Mike Reese is on the call tonight to discuss in a little more detail. If you guys don't know Mike, he is the landscape architect responsible for the design for our trails, works for Troyer Group, and one of the trail, or the main trail project through Stellar, our Lake Max Trails Phase 2 that runs down South Main Street. You know, the issue when we do a contract with INDOT and Troyer Group, early on, you know, we take a look at the GIS information that's available for free and try to estimate how many parcels will require acquisition on. And in the contract we had with Troyer Group, it covered 12 parcels. And once a survey is done and you actually start going through the engineering process, sometimes that number changes. And I think in large part because of a kind of a funky situation on South Main where there were some parcels where there was no right of way apparently dedicated to the town or county at any point. We do have more on this one than we had originally anticipated. And so at our last quarterly meeting with INDOT, I requested that they allow us to move some funds around to cover that change. However, you know, once they lock their budgets in for the year, if it's a change from one category to the next or involves moving from one fiscal year to another, they don't always approve those. And so we were not allowed to move any funds around for this. And so we're basically looking at an additional $5,842 in right-of-way engineering fees from Troyer Group for Lake Max Trails Phase 2. So Mike's here and can answer any questions you may have about it, but I would ask for approval from the commission on that additional fee for Phase 2. Mike, I'll let you speak on it for a minute if you'd like.
Sure. No, you did a good job explaining it. So there ended up being 7 additional parcels down in that area. when our sub-consultant who's doing the right-of-way engineering work, they discovered a kind of an issue that wasn't apparent on the GIS. That was the way some of the properties had been recorded down there, where we actually need to get some right-of-way. Some of the parcels will be permanent, and some is just temporary right-of-way where it's just needed for construction. But in bringing it from 12 to 19 parcels, it increased their fee, and our fee to $20,242 instead of $14,400 for the right-of-way engineering.
And I'll say, to your credit, Mike, there were some other, we have a couple contracts with Troyer. They had designed Cavalier Park and the other NDOT projects, and there were a couple cases where we came out ahead. I think State Road 10, we didn't have any right of way, and we were able to save a little bit there and move some additional funds kind of in our pocket for construction, hopefully. And then also recently, I think we approved a change to the contract for Cavalier Park because of the way some of the timing worked out. The scope of that project reduced a little bit, and Troyer was upfront about being willing to refund those fees with us. So I think they've been fair with us when it's worked out in our favor. So in this case, I think we need to work with them on it. So.
Just referencing the cash flow statement, and I, unfortunately, when we started this, I did not segregate the phase 1, 2s, or 3s on the trail project, but it simply lumped together the dollars that we had approved for all of the trail projects. At the beginning of this year, the balance of what we had committed was about $87,000, if you reference the bottom of the cash flow statement. Of that, there have been several expenses paid, $21,696 year to date. So that leaves a balance that we have committed of a little over $65,304 for, and that's all three of the trail projects. To the left of that, if you're looking at the cash flow statement, you'll see on Cavalier Park, we had committed $7,500, and none of that has been expended year to date. And I think, Jonathan, you indicated that all the invoices have been paid on that, except the retainage. Is that correct?
I believe so. I don't know if that retainage one was on your claim sheet for tonight, maybe?
No, there's nothing for Cavalier Park. To my recollection, nothing has ever been billed.
Sorry, that would have been a last council meeting. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So $7,500 is, I guess, is sitting there, and I don't know that it's going to be drawn upon.
I'd defer to Karen on that one.
I'm sorry, I had to step out and deliver a meal. What's the question?
It didn't arrive yet, Karen, but it'll be appreciated when it gets here, I'm sure.
Okay, well then. You'll be waiting for quite some time. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I never mind. I'll stop there. Jonathan and Mike had talked about the increased amount necessary for the right-of-way acquisitions for the phase 2 trail project, being an increase of how much is it? 5,600 or 5,800?
5842.
Okay. I had printing the cash statement on the bottom. I had not broken out the phase 1, 2, and 3 trail projects. I simply lumped together as committed monies over time. The balance at the beginning of the year that we had committed and had not been expended was $87,000. And so for year to date, we've approved, including claims today, 21,000.
I think we lost Rich.
Is he just
Yeah,
asking?
Rick, I don't know if you're still there. I think we lost him.
is he just asking if the
I
amount
can-
of money there is what's left? An accurate portrayal of what's
His
left,
question
or?
was- Yeah, I don't have the cash flow statement that he does in front of me, Karen, but I think his question was that there's a line item on there for 7,500 coming from
that's just-
Redevelopment Commission that was for Cat Park. And I think he
Okay.
was wondering what the status of that was, because I mentioned that I believe at our last council meeting, we had closed that out and even released retainage on that one.
Yeah, and you know what, I'm
Is that
home
right,
and I
Tom?
don't have,
Did I write that? Okay.
and actually
I
I'm at
don't know
home,
the
so-
answer for sure either, so.
Okay, sorry, I lost my line for a minute.
So I'm at home right now and I don't have access to my spreadsheet that shows
Okay.
where we're at.
Okay,
So I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to defer to the next meeting.
well, for now, as far as the commission members go, we have committed dollars toward the trail project. Are we okay if the 5,800 and some odd dollars that Mike mentioned is drawn against that balance already approved?
I would be okay with it.
I don't have a problem.
Is that a motion, Rich?
It was more a query to see if,
Mhm.
since we, I guess what I would just have committed dollars for Cavalier Park and going to be spent, that we can transfer to the Parker Trail project to offset this additional cost. But since we don't have that confirmation this evening, we have committed and have unspent dollars on the trail project. Are we, I guess this is a straw poll of the members, are we okay with approving that increased cost, but not at this point allocating additional committed dollars?
I will make a motion.
Does that make sense, Paul, or does that?
Oh, it does. It does. And we committed to doing this. It's part of Stellar, it's part of everything else. It's just an unplanned expense. And I think Tom is going to make a motion.
Okay.
Right. I'd like to make a motion that we approve $5,842 to Troyer Group to pay for additional engineering costs for the right-of-way fees for phase 2 of our trail project.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion?
A second.
Okay, so Tom has made the motion to approve $5,842 additional fees for Troyer. Sally has seconded that for the phase 2 of the park or the trail project. Is there any further discussion?
And this is unconditional to any of our future commitments, but we think that we may have some funds that were left over out of the Cavalier Park that would go over to this. But regardless, we still want to do this. That's what this motion says.
I believe so, yes. It's irregardless of transferring additional funds into there, we're accepting additional costs. I think, Tom, that's the correct interpretation of your motion.
My interpretation is regardless of what happens with the, I don't have anything in there about Cavalier Park being moved over to a different category. We're just assuming that we're going to have $7,500 that we're not going to need somewhere. So just from a cash flow standpoint and our overall budget, we can well afford this, but that is not part of my motion. It's not based on that 7,500 being moved.
Understand?
Okay. All right, with that clarification, Paul, could you take the roll, please?
Certainly. So the vote on this, Rich West.
Aye.
All right. Sally. I only call you by what your last name's so short it's easy to use. Okay, Sally was an aye, Paul is an aye, and then Tom.
Aye.
The motion is passed, unanimous.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. You want to continue on? Mike, thank you for your time and your work
Thank
on
you,
this.
Yeah, well, we have Mike here. Did anyone have any questions for him about the 3 NDOT projects? Trail Phase 2, State Road 10 sidewalks, or West Jefferson? They're all scheduled for construction sometime next year, hopefully going out to bid, I believe early next year on 2 of them, and then later spring for the trail. Does that sound about right, Mike?
Yeah, West Jefferson and State Road 10 sidewalks will be out to bid this winter to start construction in the spring. And then Lake Max Trail Phase 2 will be out to bid later in the spring to start construction later in the summer.
I have a couple questions if possible. This is Tom.
Sure.
Mike, the State Road 10, the sidewalk will go from the liquor store. How far west? Will it go to the intersection of the school?
Not that far. It will go from Maple Ridge to the corner of State Road 10 and Lakeshore, and then south on Lakeshore, past the grocery store to connect to the existing sidewalk.
Okay, so we're going to have a little, is that because that's a private homeowner right on that corner there, that it won't go to the corner?
Yeah, that was back in Stellar. That was kind of the original plan, was just to have it all on State Road 10. But we, based on some of the right of way and then just a usage standpoint, working with Jonathan and Bob, we decided to switch it to that section on Lakeshore to connect the existing sidewalk up to the corner. And then just being less density and less usage as you got a little further west towards School Street, combined with some of the right-of-way and grade issues, it kind of drops off on that south side of the road there. We decided to kind of shift the location of the project a little bit.
Because if I can remember, is there not sidewalk that comes to what, the edge of Miller Mary Manor's property?
Correct.
So that last, really basically around that corner home, we won't have anything.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If I can have one more question, what's kind of the vision? What's West Jefferson looking like in your mind? Will the telephone poles be moved to the south? Those poles that, I mean, I know this has been a CRC thing from 5 years ago. What's going to happen? What's it going to look like?
We are coordinating that with NIPSCO. I don't have the latest utility plans in front of me, but I think that one where there's the 2 poles, that's kind of the pinch point. That one we're waiting to see what they'd be willing to do. There's a couple other poles that will be moved on the north side of the street, just shifted back a little bit to allow for the kind of sidewalk trail on the north side. So there'll be some moving, but we don't have it finalized yet.
So we won't move all 7 or 8 on the south side, I think, like had been talked about at one point, Tom. Again, just too much cost, I think, to move all of those with the $2 million total we had to split between the 3 projects.
Well, and I think some of those poles were just recently redone with Sand Hill going in, if I remember right.
They did put a new 1 or 2 on the north side, but they just happened to be replacing those on their replacement schedule. Yeah.
Okay.
We did ask them to put them 20 feet further back, but it was a no-go.
And what will that look like in terms of sidewalks? Will there be sidewalk then on the north side, you're saying?
Yep, there's an 8-foot sidewalk, so it can be classified as a trail on the north side, and then a 5-foot sidewalk on the south side.
All the way out to State Road 17?
No, between Slate Street and Sand Hill Farms entrance.
Got it. Okay. Oh, because that's the end of the, is that town limit right there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you, Tom. Any
Thanks.
other questions? Okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, that's all I had for.
Thanks again.
Yeah. That's all I had for our stellar projects, our county stellar project, Cass, Slate, and Jefferson Street Trail. That application was approved by NDOT, and we've got an RFP up on our on the NDOT website now for engineering services for that project. Also, the county opened bids today on the emergency LED signs that'll go up in the 6 communities. Shannon McLeod is the grant administrator on that project, and she opened the bids. I happened to be up there for something else, and I didn't catch each one had a couple different options, and I didn't catch which one ended up being the lowest bid, but Shannon was going to review those and come to the next county commissioners meeting with a recommendation on which one to take. And then the other item I had was not related to Stellar, but the holiday decorations. I sent you guys some information out Friday. The contract is up this year. CRC has done it in the past. It had been, I believe, a 3-year contract previously, and we had 22 wreaths. The renewal amount was $3,750. But I feel like last year at CRC, there was some discussion about when the contract was up, how to handle that, because the 22 number, I think, actually goes back to when we only had 22 of those decorative light poles. And now we have, I believe, 37. And we could, renew at 22. We could ask them to do 1 wreath for each of our decorative poles. I tried to get a second quote for what that would be, but the owner was out last week and won't be back in the office until tomorrow. But if there's interest in, I guess, doubling that or going to, was it 37 or 38? Oh, I said 40. Bob said we might find some other locations to use them. So I asked them about going to 40 wreaths instead of 22. And they did say that they would essentially provide however many we needed at the same cost per unit that we are currently paying for the 22. So if we wanted to go up to 40 of those wreaths, it would be under, we could approve a not to exceed amount of $7,000 for that. So. Whatever the commission wants to do, just wanted to share that information with you.
Okay, questions for Jonathan on this, or comments or suggestions?
Will there just be a higher density, or are we going further north, further south, further east, further west? What?
Yeah,
I pick up 20 new poles or 18.
Yeah, so if you remember, Tom, I think CRC did those polls in 2 separate projects. So there was like an original project that was 22, and then I believe 15 more were added. So the last couple years, they've basically just put them at the far ends and left a few gaps here and there. So we've had some polls that haven't had wreaths on them the last couple years, and we can still do that. I just seem to remember that having come up last year, and I thought the commission wanted to look at that. So.
Okay. Do you need a vote on this tonight, or do you want to wait till the owner?
If we want to renew, it's not a rush. But I think if you want to add and get them all covered, they did want to know before the next commission meeting. So if there's consensus to increase the number of polls, I would ask for a motion to authorize me to sign a contract with them with a not to exceed of $7,000 for 40 wreaths. If that's a consensus, if the commission would rather stick with 22, that's fine too. And I that's probably not as big a rush. Just if they need to get the extra 15 or so manufactured.
Jonathan, that 7,000, is that for 3 years or is that per year?
That's per year, but we did do a 3-year contract last time. I think they'd be open to 1 year or 3.
Sally, any questions, or Paul, anything else?
I don't have any questions. I think, in the spirit of Christmas, it would look nicer if there were more.
I think I would agree with that, but would we want to entertain maybe just doing it for 1 year rather than a 3, just to see what everybody thinks it looks like? And if we did that for a year, now we come back next year and he goes, well, 3-year contract's now $8,000. Are we cutting off our nose in spite of our face? So I just wonder what the consensus would be there. Do we do a year, or do we want to look at a 3-year?
I wonder also, and the manufacturing cost, since it was a 3-year contract to begin with, if the cost that we have per wreath was based upon the fact it was a 3-year agreement. And if we only went with a 1 year now, I wonder if that cost might increase on the production.
The impression I got was that they were pretty flexible. So the previous owner actually, that I think originally the town started working with, that owned this company, Christmas Decor Systems, he passed away last year and he had sold it to a new group. And so this is their first year doing it. And I think they're pretty anxious to try and keep all the previous customers and really just still trying to learn how it all works, and seemed really flexible with whatever we wanted to do, that they wanted to work with us on it. So for what it's worth.
Jonathan, just a clarifying question. Who maintains the wreaths? Do they stay, are they town property, or do they keep them, maintain them, and then bring them back?
Yeah, it's a lease agreement. So whatever the terms are, we just get it for that year. They drop them off, make sure they all work, and then they schedule a date to come pick them back up and they store them.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, they do install them. They bring them here, install them, make sure they all work. And
I was going to say, I thought they installed them and
yes, they
removed
do.
them. So it's a turnkey operation. I mean, they install them, they remove them, and they store them.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty good deal. We don't have to mess with maintenance. We don't have to mess with installation.
Yes, Bob loves it.
Okay, so do I, go ahead, Paul, I'm sorry.
No, it's just, we just rent them and that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So do we have a motion? It seems we have consensus that we agree we should have the Christmas lights. So it doesn't seem like there's a question about renewal or not renewal. It's just whether we expand. So,
all right, I'll throw it out there. I'll make a motion that we approve a not to exceed $7,000 limit to Christmas Decor Solutions for 40 Christmas wreaths to be installed and removed this year.
so what, just clarification, a 1-year term then, Tom?
I'm going to say for 1 year. And if we want to have discussion about it, we can. Let's say for 1 year.
Okay, that's fine. And now, is there a second to that motion?
I'd kind of like to go with the 3-year, but
I can amend my motion for 3 years.
Okay, so Tom made a motion and amended it for 3 years for 40 wreaths not to exceed $7,000 a year. And Sally has seconded that motion.
that's
Okay, is there any further discussion? Paul?
All right, Rich,
Yes.
Sally,
aye.
Paul, I, Tom.
Aye.
All right, the motion is passed.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Jonathan.
The last item under town manager was just the update on municipal utilities
Well, let me
study.
do that one. That is so easy.
I say, Paul, do you want to take that one? I'll turn it
There was
over.
nothing to report. The council is working very collaboratively on exploring options, but there's really nothing to report.
Okay, thank you.
All for me.
Good. So we've covered all of those items under the town manager report, and moving on to old business, the progress reports from Develop Culver on the 2 projects. The Navigator project, which I think we pretty much closed out at the last meeting, but there was just a final report issued. I'm going to take them one at a time. Any questions on that one? Okay. I don't think we need to have any action on it. There were no funds expended. I think it was discussion about various options, but nothing came to fruition. The second project, it was the website development. There was a updated project, again, a final progress report on the project so far issued. Any comments or questions? Okay, if not, based upon upon that, at our last meeting, we had talked about doing a survey of the businesses contacted or involved with the website development. And Paul had done a draft of the survey with, I think there were 4 or 5 different questions. I don't know if you got any other feedback, Paul, on expanding those.
Not at this time. And I think it's just a good habit that we get into whenever we close out a project, that we try to do something just to capture what we can learn from it. And this is a nice, easy one to do. There were only 7 participants all in, that were interested, 4 that did, and 3 that did not. But if somebody has, I'll offer this. If somebody has any additional survey questions, they could send them to me, and I'll incorporate that into a document, share that with everybody. But I don't know if this needs a motion or not. But I think I'm certainly willing to go out and do as much of the survey off of those questions, and then call and pull the information together, or share it with any of the other CRC members, and we go and we talk to some of the businesses using these survey questions and get this information, and then roll it into one final document to add with our final report from Develop Culver.
Yeah, and I think that's a good practice. I think, Jonathan, do you have experience with the SurveyMonkey or other types of survey software that could facilitate some of the tracking on this? I mean, again, it's only 7 or 8.
And you're muted.
We could do that. Quite frankly, with such a small number, it's easy enough to make a phone call and talk to each of the individual businesses.
I mean, just in terms of capturing their comments, I would suggest it be in writing or an email or something like that. You could do a follow-up call, but again, if I agree with surveying them. So any other comments or questions from any other members? I don't know that we need do you feel we need a motion on this, Paul? I mean, I think it's just
not necessarily, no.
No. Okay. Right. Any objections to this from Sally or Tom?
I don't have any objections. Think it's a good idea.
Okay.
I'm good. Thanks for doing it, Paul, putting it together.
Glad to. And I'll get with Jonathan about either using SurveyMonkey and then or giving the owners, the businesses, an option to do either. It's always good for them to talk to somebody if they want to do that. And regardless how it's done, they'll follow those questions. If you have a question that you want to add to the survey, just
if you send it out in writing and then did a follow-up call to expand on comments or explore more, you may have a basis for the discussion. But that's just, I'll let you figure that out or deal with it the best, however you feel you should. Moving on, facade grants. Tom, anything new?
I do not have anything new. I think you can see on Main Street that No Walk is the front face of the building is gone. So I'm anxious to see how that continues to develop. I haven't had any other contact or communication from Collins regarding their interest in doing some improvements to the Collins building further down on South Main. Other than that, I don't have anything new.
Okay. I know Kevin Berger, I believe, is on the line. Kevin, anything that you'd like to add on the Nowak building?
We have started. We did the demolition on there. We found some structural issues that you couldn't see until demolition. We have some new structural columns coming to support the existing beam that's unsupported, and we should be moving ahead on that soon.
Yeah, it's, I'm not an engineer, but it looked like there was, that beam was supported by sort of a hanging brick on one side at least. It was a little precarious.
There's a sky hook involved and some other things that aren't really safe.
Okay, so that building is in our thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
So
It made it through the storm the other week, so I think we're okay until we get things shored up.
okay, all right, good. Thank you, Kevin, for that,
Yep.
and Tom for your update. So Paul, you'd asked that we put on the agenda a discussion about cutoff times for reports and information coming to the commission. Do you want to address that?
Thank you, Rich. And this is something I'd like everyone to think about, and maybe we actually take an action. We take an action on it in the September meeting if every one of the we're able to have everyone there to vote. But I think we're getting more complex issues and topics, and in the past, sometimes it's been okay for somebody to bring something in at the meeting, at the time of the meeting, saying, by the way, we'd like to do this, and it may be pretty simple to vote on at the time, but it doesn't give us enough time to sit and think through. You know, you look at some of the things that that we're doing, and it never crossed my mind, and I'm not on council, but it never crossed my mind that the mural going on the fire department building was a public building and it needed town council's approval. The information that comes in, you know, I'd like to see us get it further ahead of time. Similar, you know, BZA does it, and other organizations may do it, that we have a chance to look at it so we can review it, we can think about it and put our questions together. I'm not sure what that time is, because right now we have an informal process where Rich gets the draft agenda out to us the Wednesday before the meeting. By that Friday, he mostly has everything and shares it with us. But I think have something where we make an announcement and we make sure people know, if you want it to be considered for action or a vote, that it needs to be received by X date before the meeting, and we can decide what that is. And I'm wondering how that, you know, I want to open a discussion about it. And does it apply to all the categories, to claims? Does it apply to facade grants? How do, you know, is there a different time frame for those when we have projects, whether it's MEDC updates or any other group we're working with, we have updates, that their updates are given to us in a manner that we can, at a time that we can look through it. So that's what I want to open up the conversation to everybody here.
Yeah, since you mentioned it, Paul, I've thought a little bit about it, and I agree with you. It's troubling to get things at the last minute, and sometimes you know, I don't get things out until the last minute. But it doesn't give you much time to think about or consider something. One suggestion, and again, we don't have to vote on it today, but to consider it for our next meeting, is in order to get on the agenda with an action item, then the documentation needs to be in when the draft agenda is published. So even to get onto the draft agenda, you have to have documentation available. I think I wouldn't want to completely squelch any sort of impromptu thinking that may occur at a meeting where somebody may say, oh, hey, how about this? And then we take it back and consider it for the next meeting. Or if it's a no-brainer or something, to go with it quickly. But I do agree with you. In most cases, I think it would be helpful to have information to consider ahead of time, and we might just tie it to the agenda going out. So can't get on the agenda unless you've got materials if you're asking for an action item.
What I might chime in with is, like, take for instance tonight with this the Christmas wreath. I mean, we all knew about it beforehand because Jonathan had given us some fair warning about it, and, you know, had some time to think about it. I mean, how, but yet he really wanted an answer tonight so that he knew which way to tell the owner to go. If we want to update it, we need some time. So, I mean, what's your thought on that, Paul, in terms of like the way it worked with this particular instance?
Oh, so let's put Jonathan on the spot. I thought he did a good job in that he notified us before the weekend, and he identified that he was looking for an action. So he was clear in both the on the Christmas decorations as well as the Troyer group that he was looking for things and came actually with his own recommendation in there. And that gave us time to think about it. We had questions and the like. This is not trying to be an onerous process for other people, but if they expect us to put thoughtful consideration into something and to be able to really get to a good decision on it, they should be giving us this type of information. And then there is a follow-on to this to both, I guess, Jonathan and Karen, to make sure we have a vehicle and a means to communicate this out so everyone's aware of the requirement if we do come up with one in our next meeting. But I thought Jonathan's, I could be off base, but I thought Jonathan was pretty good in laying everything out. So it gave us, there were no surprises in what he had to present, and we knew what he was going to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. I think we had adequate information in an adequate time frame on those two projects that Jonathan brought up. I
think my point is we're not looking to take it to the extreme where something's presented to us tonight and we won't take a vote or a motion until next meeting. We're not going to wait a month on everything.
You know, we had special COVID meetings where we voted on something. I can count maybe on one hand and have a lot of fingers left over where we've had something come in that we absolutely had to take action on because it was something that developed in the last 48 hours. Most of the time when somebody brings something to us, it's because they haven't brought it to us. They've been thinking about it well before the meeting, and they just brought it to us at the meeting. And I think I would like to change that. So if there is something they want us to consider, they know they need to get it to us X days ahead of time. And again, I don't think we're putting an administrative obstacle in front of them. We're just asking them to be professional with us so we can give full consideration of what they want.
Paul, I think the one area where I don't want to say I'll take exception, but at least raise the question is claims, because in those cases, those are projects that we've already approved. And we're pretty much just approving the funding. And again, Karen gets us those claims usually by the end of the week before. But again, we're not making a new commitment for dollars. We're just authorizing that payments be made on projects that we've already approved. So I don't know that one has to be too far in advance, would be my thought.
My feeling on that is, you know, if we have the information the Friday previous to the meeting, that gives us some time to mull it over the weekend. What I hate is to get an email, you know, I'm busy, I'm out of town, I get back 15 minutes before the meeting, I open it and there's 7 different things for the agenda that have just arrived, and some of them are 3 pages long, but there's no way you can consider that. But if they'd showed up on Friday, I would have been able to read through them and give some thought to it. So I'm not sure that we need to say that it has to be in. It would be nice if it was in the Wednesday before when you have the agenda, but so that it could be on the agenda. But Friday is a absolute last ditch.
When Friday is typically the day that Karen needs to publish the agenda. So maybe instead of talking about materials in by the draft agenda, that if you want to make the final cut on the agenda, then materials need to be in for then.
And I don't know whether that needs to be in by, 10 a.m. or 4 p.m. I don't know when she advertises it.
For the meeting dates and agenda, Sally, I think, Karen, we usually run all the meeting dates. So if it's a normal set meeting date, she runs them at the beginning of the year. And so there's not that 48-hour hard deadline like for a meeting that's not been announced when it comes to just putting out the agenda. But yeah, I think I think it just depends on schedule sometime that Friday.
I mean, I usually try and get it to Karen Friday morning before 10 o'clock.
And I'm going to chime in. Something that would be helpful along the same line is if if the communication for the CRC came from one source, it's kind of sometimes hard to find all those multiple emails from different people of stuff that come, or that there's a common folder that all CRC stuff goes to. So when we open up for a meeting, we're not opening up. I mean, everybody else might be printing all their stuff out and having a hard copy in front of them, but I try to do it electronically. So it'd be nice. One location or one person communicating everything. Just a side note.
Okay. I think that's a good point. I find myself doing the same thing, and Sally and I, in fact, were doing it just before the meeting, scurrying around trying to find a couple of either the agenda notice with the team meeting link on it. So,
Right.
Paul, do you think that gives you enough feedback? I mean, there seems to be consensus without becoming overly restrictive.
Right. And again, to your point about claims, we have a process in place where claims can only get approved a certain way. Karen has a certain process to go through that she's required to go through on that. And we can revisit this in our next meeting under old business, come back to this, and I'll sum up the conversation from here. And that way, with Sue and everybody else, we can just revisit it and say, okay, here's what we want to do. And we can set that structure up to have it where we get it within a period of time that we can review it. And Rich, as you said, if somebody wants to put something on the agenda, they have to give you information, and they might give you interim if they give it to you through the month. But that Friday when you send it out, this is the stuff that that the CRC is going to see. So they need to give you their updated info by that date. And I don't think this will be that difficult, and hopefully it'll make us a little bit better about, easier for us to be prepared for each of our meetings.
One that comes to mind that I don't know if it's problematic or not, but a lot of times on the facade grant, Tom, you don't get the information until probably just before the meetings. Is that correct?
It seems that a lot of times that's the way it's worked out. Yeah. And then what typically, I mean, Paul's exactly right, because I'm usually the only one that's got a hard copy, and I'm reporting what I'm reading. You guys should really have the same information in front of you. And it would be nice to have that at least the Friday before our meeting, that if there is something like a facade grant, which, I really like the idea Karen's proposed it, and I don't know how to do that. You guys are more into how a joint email / folder would work, that everything got thrown into one folder that we could, I did the same thing. I'm like, oh, it's 5 minutes up. I type in Jonathan and I got 8,000 Jonathans. I got to find the right one that's got tonight's meeting in it. So, that if there was a way to pursue that, I think that organizationally would really help us out. But then also, maybe facade grant could be scanned into a program like that, because normally it's multiple pages, because it's got estimates and it's got their paperwork and W-9 and all that stuff.
We could look at something like a Dropbox, or Jonathan, you have more technology knowledge on it than I do, but
So like I can take like board
I'm technology.
for like my school board meetings, I have it's a web-based platform that they only log into, and I drop all information into that location on a web page that they have a restricted access to. So
Yeah,
they can open all the stuff.
We do have a blank page set up like that. We could do that. We could do Dropbox. We could, whatever the commission I think wants to do with those options. I don't think it's too difficult.
We really have issues. First is setting a timeline and an expectation for anyone that's participating. If they want their action considered in a particular meeting, they have to have it to us in a certain time. And the second is because, Rich, you're the guy that gets stuck sending all this stuff out. So if we give you an opportunity to have a single spot that you can say, this is where all the final information goes for all of us, then we have a spot to go, a folder to go look at and pull the information from. So those are really the two issues we're talking about here.
Yeah. So maybe Jonathan, for the next meeting, could you perhaps give us just some bullet point options on either using the page that you identified, or we could set up a shared Dropbox, just what those would be. And if you could send that out with your town manager report on Friday, that would be good. So we'd have a chance to look at it in advance. And then Paul, maybe if you could, based upon the feedback you got today, draft some type of statement as far as timeliness of presenting things, and I mean, using the agenda as the timing point, the final agenda, perhaps.
Glad to.
Okay.
If I could just, sorry,
Go for it.
I was just going to add, I think whatever deadline you set for agenda items, I'd say, Tom, we can add to the application for facade grants that the deadline is the Wednesday before the CRC meeting or the Thursday before or whatever. And yeah, I mean, you can, if they, because I know sometimes they seem to catch you in person and give them to you directly. Like if you want to come in, give it to Karen or Julie or I, happy to scan it in. And that way, yeah, we could upload it there and share it with everybody. But I do think, right, people handing them to you at 4:30 Monday probably is not the best scenario for everybody to get a good chance to go over it. So.
All good stuff, guys.
Okay, good. Thank you, Paul, for suggesting that.
My pleasure.
There's no other discussion on that. And we already talked about holiday lights. We'll go through member input. Karen, do you have anything you'd like to raise with the group today?
Schumann or Heim?
Karen Schumann.
Nope, I'm all right now. Thanks.
Okay, good. Sally, anything from you?
I don't have anything right now.
Okay. Tom, anything to add?
I'm good to go. Thank you.
Paul, anything new?
Not at this time.
Okay. And I don't have anything either. So with that, I would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn. Our next meeting is September 21st.
I'll make a motion to adjourn then.
I'll second.
Okay. Paul, you want to see if there's any opposition to that?
Well, Rich,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
Paul, aye. Karen, you always get the vote on this.
Aye.
And Tom,
Aye.
unanimously passed.
All right. Thank you all for your interest and hard work and attendance. We'll look forward to see some information before our next meeting.
All right. Have a good evening. Good night.
Bye.
Aye.
Good night.
Welcome to a school board meeting if they want to come.
Karen, can you hang on for just a minute? Or are you gone already? You're gone. Karen Schumann. Okay, never mind.